Good morning, everyone. Once again, thank you so much for joining us for this July 2nd, 2024 E-Truck Workforce Development Advisory Committee. Appreciate you all making time for this meeting and very exciting presentation we have from our guest presenter that we'll introduce in a few minutes. My name is Giovanni Hernandez, and Gia, can we do next slide, please? So just a quick run through of the agenda. We do have some folks that are new to the space for the first time in this meeting. So we'll do a team intro. We'll do a quick project and WDAC overview so that folks have an idea of this group and what we've been doing, what our objectives are. We'll provide an overall project updates. And then we'll kick it off, turn it over to our guest presenter from Evo Electric. So we're very excited to hear this presentation and are super grateful to have Bill Beverly, who you'll learn a little bit more about in a few minutes. And then from there, we'll just turn it over to have a Q&A. We have some prepared questions, but also we'd love to have questions coming in from our attendees as well. So next slide, and we'll do a quick round of intro. So again, I'm Giovanni Hernandez. I'm Clean Mobility Program Manager for Grid Alternatives of the Greater Los Angeles. And I'll turn it over to my colleagues, Shamika and Stella.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shamika Dixon, and I'm the Director of Workforce Development for Grid Alternatives, and I'll go ahead and pass it to Stella.
Thank you, Shamika. Hi, everyone. My name is Stella Ursua. I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Partnerships, and thank you so much for joining us once again for an advisory committee meeting. Thank you. Let's see, anyone else? Or you want me to hand it over to CalSTART, Giovanni?
Yep.
Yeah, who do we have on the call today from CalSTART?
Hi, everybody. My name is Tuanchi. I'm a project manager here at CalSTART. Thank you all for being here with us today. I'll pass it on to Giovanna.
Hello, I'm Giovanna Escamilla. I'm an associate project manager here at CalSTART. Yeah, thank you, everyone. And if anyone else is from CalSTART here, go for it. If not, to Kristen.
I believe Lisa is actually on.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for being here. My name is Lisa. I facilitate project outreach for CalSTART. And with that, I will pass it on to Kristen.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kristen Bush. I work with EPRI's electrotransportation team as an engineer scientist, but glad to have you all on the call today.
All right. So with that, let's go to next slide, and Gia or Tuan for this project overview.
Yeah, okay. So just doing a quick project overview. If you've joined us before, you've heard this, but for any new attendees, E-Truck's project purpose is to create a research hub in California to accelerate the heavy-duty drayage vehicle market in key areas. Goals include advancing the research, development, and demonstration needed to extend the delivery range of heavy-duty battery electric trucks, beginning with drayage. Next is engaging broad stakeholders to ensure E-Truck utilizes community feedback and input to promote community engagement and workforce development with a community-first approach. And lastly, the project aims to plan, design, and deploy innovative public corridor charging strategies for battery electric trucks. And again, this begins with drayage. And I will pass it over to Stella, I believe.
I got this one. So just a quick overview of our Workforce Development Advisory Committee goals and objectives for anyone, for folks that are new here for the first time joining us. You know, the WDAC for short, right? Our goal is to ensure that pollution impacted, underserved, and tribal communities are involved in creating and guiding this initiative, and that priority communities are involved and benefit from just the clean, larger clean energy initiatives, the electrification of the goods movement, right? That jobs created and other resultant economic opportunities trickle down to these disadvantaged priority communities. And so objectives of this group, right, is to, for example, inform this project on workforce development needs, any gaps, desired impacts, right, for priority communities, the promotion of equity and workforce development opportunities in priority communities, and of course, the fostering of workforce development partnerships in targeted priority communities for zero emission freight corridor technology development, planning, and job creation. So just a quick snippet there, right, of our goals and objectives. So with that, I'll kick it back over to Gia.
Thank you. Okay, so for some project updates. All right, so we had our Dredge 101 Industry Partner Webinar Series. That is now up on the website. You can view the slide deck, the recording, and a fact sheet. And just a heads up that our next webinar will be November 6th, and we're going to be going over EV Site Planning 101. Also, there are 4 new reports up on our website, and you can visit the Documents and Reports tab to read these. Highly recommend just kind of checking it out. You can skim, read the abstract. There's a lot of good information in there. For the pilot demonstration sites, construction will begin soon, so mid-2024, for the sites in Ontario and Carson, California. Our regional freight heat map is live on the eTruck website, and we are currently working on incorporating an equity layer onto this. And lastly, you can find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Go ahead and scan the QR code right here, and it'll link you to all of those. But yeah, those are our updates, and I will pass it back.
All right, thank you, Gia. So one last update before we turn it over to our guest presenter from Evo Electric. I wanted to provide an exciting update on our CBO stipend opportunity. So as you all know, we relaunched, right, the application period from, that we originally launched last year. There was some delays, and we had to sort of rethink this collaboration and partnership with 6 different CBOs for this partnership opportunity. And we relaunched it again at the beginning of this year. And finally, we have made a selection for 6 community-based organizations, 3 that are focused on community engagement, so that we'll be supporting the efforts of the CTAC, right, which is the Community First Technology Advisory Committee, and then 3 that will support the efforts for this advisory committee, the Workforce Development Advisory Committee. And so the 6 have been selected for ongoing participation in this project. And you can see them on screen. The 3 for the CTAC will be the Sierra Club, California Mobility Fund, and Bike LA. And the 3 that were selected for the workforce development effort supporting this WDAC will be Conservation Corps of Long Beach, Watsconda, and Hub Cities Career Center. So just a little bit about the 3 WDAC organizations that we just briefly wanted to share with you all in case you aren't familiar with these organizations. So Conservation Corps of Long Beach, since 1987, has worked to help youth realize their potential while serving the Gateway Cities region. And they offer workforce development programs and an array of trainings that lead to industry recognized credentials, internships, personal development, and more. And they also offer, paid job career training on various conservation environmental sectors, and wraparound support services, scholarships, et cetera, et cetera. Then Watsconda provides community development, organizing, outreach for environmental education, advocacy for all stakeholders, particularly in the Watts community of Los Angeles. And Watsconda has a track record in workforce development, planning, linkage, and development, especially relative to EVSCE charging infrastructure development to ensure people are connected to emerging industries, such as in the clean transportation sector. And last but not least, Hub City's Career Center is actually part of the Hub Cities Consortium. And so for over 35 years, Hub Cities Consortium has been the economic development and workforce development agency offering services in Southeast Los Angeles region, representing 8 different cities and 2 unincorporated areas in the Sela region. So in 2001, the nonprofit side of the organization, which is called Hub Cities Career Center, was launched. And so Hub Cities Career Center works and partners with over 150 different organizations, which include 50 community-based organizations in the Sela region to leverage resources and to better assist communities that they serve. So we are super excited to work with all 6 of these organizations more closely, and particularly speaking for workforce development. These 3 organizations are leaders in their respective regions, experts in what they do, and we're excited to learn from them, to partner with them, just to better support our efforts here on the workforce development side of things. So just wanted to provide that quick update for all of you, and congratulations to all 6 of these organizations. With that, I, just being mindful of time here, want to turn it over to Shamika to introduce our guest presenter for today. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. So today I have the pleasure of introducing Bill Beverly, who is the co-founder, co-CEO, and CTO of Evo Electric. So without further ado, Bill, take it away.
All right, very cool. Thanks, everybody. I enjoyed really hearing the updates and understanding a bit more of the e-truck mission. So really excited to be here and share about what we're up to at Evo Electric. So yeah, I'm Bill Beverly, one of the 2 co-founders of Evo Electric, founded in 2019. My background is in engineering. I've been in engineering for 21 years. I've done the math earlier this morning. Hurts my brain still, but learned a lot in this space. Did aerospace in the Southern California area for the first 10 years and EVs in Southern California for the last 11, working for companies like Faraday Future, Romeo Power doing battery packs, and then also a company called EV. And it's in that part of the lifelong journey, if you will, through the startups and the evolution of the sector that my partner and I really recognized some issues in the road to electrification on a global scale, which was there's a lot of talk, but not a lot of execution, right? And so we wanted to make sure that what we actually put forth and what we brought to the market was something that added value to not just those that could reasonably afford it, like large corporations and organizations that are, that are pushing to electrify their operations, but also for people in our own backyards. A lot of the community members and a lot of the small businesses that are in underserved communities that don't know or have the education advantage to be able to understand the transition to electrification. So what we said is, let us rapidly convert existing vehicles from diesel or gas. And when we say existing vehicles, we're talking about commercial vehicles, trucks, for example, and let's convert them from their combustion engine background to electric. Next slide. So what we have been doing since 2019 is exactly as it says here, accelerating fleet electrification with what we call our circular EV solutions. As you see on the left side, we take an existing vehicle. For example, this was in an operation in Mexico with our partners at Grupo Modelo, who's owned by Anheuser-Busch. And we took their existing vehicle that had over 10 years of previous life on it that was sitting broken in their junkyard, if you will, in Mexico. We removed the system, we replaced it with 100% electric smart system, got it back into their operation. And the best part about this entire thing is it's the easiest and most sensible way to transition to a world of electrification. We're not forcing anybody to acknowledge a new change, to figure out a new technology. We're gracefully and simply transitioning into a technology that can be easily adopted into existing operations. So next slide, please. So why we thought this was important is because when we took a step back after working for major original equipment manufacturers, vehicle manufacturers in the EV space, and also battery manufacturers, we looked at the fact that everybody's chasing the transition to passenger electric vehicles as a big marker for success in cleaning up the air and the roads. What we missed, though, is when we look at the overall number of vehicles on the road, maybe only 10% of those vehicles on the road are commercial trucks. And I'm talking about Class 8 down to Class 3. So basically an 18-wheeler that you see coming in and out of the ports, for example, or as small as an Amazon van, right? Where EV Electric likes to really play is right in the middle mile. So a Class 4, 5, 6, or 7. Basically, the way to think about it is anything you'll find in the U-Haul parking lot. So when we did the math, we recognized that maybe only 10% of the global vehicles on the road are those commercial vehicles. But what really stumped us here is over 30% of the emissions across the world really come from that small sector. So even though it's only 10% of all vehicles, an overwhelming 30% of emissions comes from those vehicles. So we recognize that if you can actually focus a challenge to electrify that sector of the market, you can actually make a lot happen with a very focused amount of effort. So a lot can be done in a little in a focused direction. So we see that in terms of how the governments are really incentivizing the transition by focusing on electrification of this sector, medium duty, heavy duty, but also looking at other methods. For example, fuel cell EVs, as what FCEV says here. So we're excuse me, we're not exactly bullish on just battery electric alone. We're bullish on an entire transitional technology stack. But what makes the most sense right now in the medium duty sector is battery electric because of the types of duty cycles, the ways that trucks are driven. We're talking about metropolitan regional routes that your box truck will never even leave LA proper. So why do you need 400 miles of hydrogen power or things like that? So this is really where the workhorse of transportation occurs. And it makes sense why, not just our California government, which is the most advanced and progressive government for electrification in the world, but governments across the world are really trying to find ways to electrify this sector. Next slide, please. So the big problem, like we said, there's three main issues: regulation, access, and affordability. And so let me dive into each one of those a bit. You as a fleet owner, let's say, put your fleet owner hat on for a second. You're being told by the state of California, for example, and as we know, that by regulation, you must transition your fleets over by 2045. Your future sales, your future purchases must come from zero emissions trucks. But some of you might not know that the Advanced Clean Truck and Advanced Clean Fleet rules are already in effect. And although some sectors in the drayage area, some customers or fleet owners in the drayage centers already have some waivers for this, you're already being penalized for your lack of adoption of zero emission trucks. So regulation is there. It's made a mighty push into forcing the hand. However, there's not a whole lot of access to solutions. That's the next column. So some of our competitors in this space, original equipment manufacturers, vehicle manufacturers, they have a 9 to 18 month lead time. So even if you, as a fleet owner, said, hey, I do want to electrify 10 to 15 trucks, you're waiting 9 to 18 months for those vehicles to be delivered just so you can access them and actually start using them in your operation. Moreover, access really hasn't been growing fast enough to meet the regulation push in the last few years. Really, looking at California's zero emission truck market share alone, only 0.7% is estimated at the end of 2023 to really be zero emission trucks. So meaning of all the trucks in California that are registered, only less than 1% has actually been electrified. So we've got a long way to go. And as that previous slide showed, some of the third-party analysts in McKinsey and groups like that recognize that 2025 is really the cusp point for change and adoption based on regulation, based on incentives and things like that. So we expect that number to go way up. But the problem is right now as a fleet owner, you don't have access to a technology that's comparable to what you need. And the last but not least, even if you find something, for example, a Class 4 box truck, a new diesel costs somewhere around $65,000 to $85,000. But a new electric will cost you around $180,000 on average. So the decision's kind of been made. You're sitting back saying, forget it, I don't want to do this. This doesn't really make sense. And then this is before incentives from California, mind you. So there is some discounting to go on. But with a combination of these three pillars of obstacles, if you will, it becomes really difficult to make an educated and rapid decision to be compliant to the regulations. So, next slide, please. So what we did is we put together a team. Myself and my business partner, Jackson, both founded the organization, like I said, but we put together a team of about 15 individuals. What you see here is our core leadership team who's had experience in this sector, both from a leadership in engineering, because we needed the best electrical controls gurus in the field. We needed the best industry veterans that have actually put together electric vehicles that have actually been distributed on the road, whether they're passenger vehicles, shuttle buses, or even big trucks. We also needed business leaders that have scaled products into production environments where they can do tens, hundreds, thousands of vehicles or vehicle-related products in a controlled environment. And then also sales leaders that had an appetite and an understanding for multiple regions. Another thing I didn't mention, except for the very first slide that I showed, was we're extremely bullish on serving underserved communities, even outside of our own barriers here, our own boundaries in Los Angeles, and looking at a global scale, starting with Latin America, for example, because the way that we recognize Latin America is utilizing their logistics vehicles in the medium duty space is inherently keeping those vehicles alive for much longer than on average here in the United States, and taking very good care of those vehicles to prolong the value of those vehicles over time. And that's something that really benefits an electric vehicle pipeline, electric vehicle life cycle, because you can actually squeeze out as much value as you can with this new OpEx asset. You're moving from a depreciation related business into an operational type of business. And so that's something that we saw Latin America already really understands very well. So if we introduce a product that works really well in our backyard, again, the most progressive pseudo country in the world, California, one of the largest, obviously, economies, then that vehicle will no doubt have a very good playground in adjacent sectors, adjacent states, adjacent countries as well. And so we've completed our team from a leadership perspective with some leaders that are based in Latin America, one of which is actually joining here in the United States to lead us in the electric vehicle sales and marketing perspective, NERA as well. So it's a bit about our team, 130 years of EV experience, very difficult to find these types of veterans because there are a lot of companies that have tried, like I mentioned earlier, but not a whole lot of companies that have succeeded to bring a product to market. And that's something we're trying to all fix, and that's what unites us. Next slide, please. So we got together to say, all right, how do we solve this problem? There's some huge barriers and the talent isn't out there to move the needle fast enough on the OEM side, on the vehicle manufacturer side. So what we did is we said, let us produce, like I mentioned earlier, some rapid to assemble kits that are almost as simple as being able to do it yourself. And I'll get to that in a second. What we ended up creating was a vehicle product that is enabled through our aftermarket kits. When I say kits, I'm talking about all the components that convert the once diesel system into a fully electric system. That includes electric motor, batteries, that includes power electronics that convert previous systems over to the new electric system, things like pumps or brakes, things like that. And that kit gets installed rapidly into these existing trucks that have already been on the road for the past 7 to 10 years. What's one thing that is worth noting right up front here is these vehicles in this sector are typically designed by the original equipment manufacturers for around 30 to 40 years of useful life. But the real sad issue here is after about 10 to 15 years of utilization, these vehicles actually go into the junkyard because by that time they've had 2, 3, maybe even 4 diesel or gas engine overhauls. And it's assumed by fleet owners that there's no more value to be excised from that vehicle. We can't argue more against that. In fact, we think that the limiting function here in this entire vehicle is the engine, right? So once you remove the engine and those rotating components, you have a healthy chassis that, like I said, still has 15 to 20 years of remaining life from that OEM. And so that chassis, we remove the box, replace the box with another box, but also the cabin where this gentleman is sitting at the bottom here, that cabin and that chassis come together to form a brand new opportunity for second life utilization of this asset. So what we call a circular economy or a circular EV approach. And so what that really differentiates, leads to in terms of differentiation in our product is because we start with a depreciated asset, you get a 45% lower upfront cost, right? Because that vehicle is being repurposed. We have a 2-day conversion target. Right now, it takes us about 1 week per truck. I mentioned earlier, it takes large manufacturers 8 or 9 to 18 months. So we're already moving much faster than that. That's the name of the game. These are optimized for last and middle mile, like I said. So metropolitan areas, they have a range of about 110 miles fully loaded, which at first glance, people may balk at that and say, I think I need 200 miles. But when we actually take a look at fleet owners' utilization records, telemetry, a lot of the vehicle GPS tracking, we recognize that there's a very robust pattern of utilization that per day arrives around 50 to 80 miles a day. So 110 loaded miles will get a fleet owner what they need per day. And we are optimized also for charging overnight in a facility. So if you have a level 2 charger, or another way to think about it is if you have a washer dryer plug that is 220, you can actually charge this vehicle overnight every night back to 100% feasibly, and it's ready to go every day. It's very much like one of these cell phones, right? So it's just like you use your cell phone. At the end of the day, you plug it in, it's ready to go in the morning. You don't even think about it. That's what we're really trying to do with these vehicles. But if you're a fleet owner that says, that's not quite enough, what if I want to run a little bit more in my operation? That's fine. We also offer ultra fast charging, which means we can actually charge this truck in less than 1 hour on DC fast charging, all on public infrastructure, all on publicly available standardized infrastructure charging networks as well. This in turn relates to 10 years of extended life at the minimum, and then best in class reliability because we have brand new technologies, brand new subsystems. These are all components that are sourced from top tier suppliers across the world. So it's not just a garage operation. You don't get to 2 days by finding components off the shelf and just trying to do something. We actually have to engineer a streamlined kit that is able to rapidly install into existing vehicles. So we have direct supply agreements with the largest battery suppliers in the world, the largest electric motor suppliers around the world. And therefore we can move very quickly and also offer price discounts as well because of the volume partnerships that we have. Next slide. All right, so a little bit on total cost of ownership. So in terms of value savings, some of the things that you can look at, this is prepared by some of our customers actually at Anheuser-Busch. When you look at a 7 or 10 year time frame of this vehicle in operation versus the existing diesel, what you end up noticing is the fact that the EV electric solution, or even just any electric solution, offers a significant cost savings almost immediately. It's important to note that the blue really represents the upfront cost. Yes, there is a larger upfront cost of the EV electric product versus a diesel system. But as you see, the remaining costs in operation are so much less significant in terms of the overall stack up. And those are related to things like energy or fuel, for example, preventative maintenance, corrective maintenance. As you see, those are really loss leaders when it comes to operating a diesel truck. Some of you may already know that. When Anheuser-Busch prepared this total cost of ownership analysis, they actually extended it over a 10-year time frame and said, hey, if we continue to use this same vehicle over 10 years, we get additional savings because that's where we start seeing a real rise in the diesel operational costs. And they're looking at another thing that's very unique in this space where it's not typical to really run these vehicles up to 15 years because typically at that point, you've lost so much money, sunk so much money in just operating the vehicle that they just purchased brand new diesels or gas. But they're actually exploring a potential for 15-year ownership and 15-year battery electric vehicle savings, where their projections have led to a number that's not posted here, but about 58% savings versus a diesel in that operation. It remains to be seen if the market's going to go in that direction, but it's interesting to see that this is actually an approach that's already been taken on utility scale energy storage, where systems used to be sized for 5 and 10 years, for example, but they're now being stretched to 15, maybe even 20 years because of the value propositions of and savings of battery itself. A couple other items that are important to note: fuel cost savings of greater than 70%, maintenance cost savings of greater than 50%. We mentioned the extension of life of over 10 years, and then TCO up to 41%, but over 10 years. But the other thing that we didn't talk about was because we take an existing vehicle out of the need for manufacturing, basically, the other way to say it is instead of buying a brand new vehicle, which is manufactured from scratch, from the bottom up, we're taking a chassis and a cabin that have already been manufactured and repurposing it. Therefore, our analysis says that we're also showcasing the benefit of 50% additional savings of carbon dioxide in the generation of our technology, because we take an existing built device and convert it rather than having to build that device again from scratch. So that's a huge, huge value proposition that we continue to talk to our local emissions leaders, such as CARB, obviously CalSTART, and also South Coast Air Quality Management District, which is down here with us. We're headquartered in Compton, Rancho Dominguez, by the way. So next slide. Now the fun part, right? So the last few minutes I want to take to talk about how we do this, right? So there are 3 camel humps when it comes to scaling a large organization. When I talk about camel humps, I'm talking about funding, right? The investment and capital required to get these companies off the ground, and I've seen it. First one, you've got to develop in a company that's developing a technology from scratch, including a vehicle. You've got to fund the development. You've got to fund the team, the assets, all the engineering that's required to do it. Secondly, you've got to fund the production. You've got to manufacture it. You've got to create a facility. You've got to create a line, all the capital equipment that goes into it. And the third hump is you've got to sustain that vehicle. You've got to deliver those vehicles on the road. You've got to keep them on the road. And so those are enough to cripple any company. After many billions of dollars raised, it's really, really difficult to actually sustain that type of lopsided organization until you finally sell a whole lot of vehicles. Well, we wanted to flip that upside down. So we said, we recognize that there's already an existing workforce that's being alienated from this transition to electric. So how can we tap in the existing workforce, existing service centers and maintenance centers, for example, that have very skilled technicians and workforce that just want to be part of the transition, right? So our focus is to simplify. We standardize our technology to become as simple as a kit and a crate. Again, these are components that are, all the engineering has been done. It's been pre-done on all these vehicles that we're converting. So we deliver a kit and a crate. We standardize the installation process, like I say, providing documentation that's so simple, it's almost like IKEA simple, right? Almost do it yourself. And then because of that 1-2 punch, we can actually approach existing infrastructure, which means shops, equipment, and people, upskill the people, upskill the shops, and do very little equipment adjustments. So very, very minimal tooling is required to do our efforts. And we've designed it that way. We can actually work within existing shops. And once we combine those 3 things, we're able to actually expand globally very quickly because we're bringing solutions into the market rather than pushing solutions into the market, right? We're leveraging our partnerships. And so the way for us to get to comparable volumes, as you would typically see for a large vehicle manufacturer of 100,000 to 400,000 units per year, is we partner with 1,000 garages, whether they're large corporates that already have their in-house garages like Anheuser-Busch here in the picture, or like a Napa Truck Center, or a mom and pop type garage in their own backyard. We partner with 1,000 of them, and we each commission them to do 100 trucks each. So the simple math is we can do 100,000 trucks per year with 0 manufacturing space at Evolectric, right? Because these are existing service centers, existing capital, existing workforce and talent. So next slide, please. This isn't just a dream. We've actually done this. We did this in Mexico with Anheuser-Busch's existing Grupo Modelo talent. So as you see here, the top 3 pictures are snapshots of the workforce, the team that was actually commissioned to remove the components from the old truck. And then with our support in Mexico City, we actually upskilled that team very quickly. And 2 weeks after we received the parts in Mexico City, we had this vehicle up and running in their fleet operation. So this isn't just a dream. This is something that we've proven we can do. And it was a language barrier, obviously. So we're working even more closely with a lot of our enablers and partners in these regions, in these markets, and really opening up the lateral growth of this partnership. Next slide. This next slide is a quick video, if you don't mind playing that. And I'll talk through it. So what we're going to show here is actually a video of what we actually did in Mexico City. This is a video you can access on our YouTube as well, but it's fun to show pictures, but it's even more fun to show video, right? So what this is a really quick 1 minute and 33 seconds of the project that we had in Mexico City. As you can see here, this is a 2010 Isuzu ELF, which is very similar to what we call an N series here in the United States. As you can see, the workforce was there removing all the old components. They did a nice paint job on the existing box, on the existing cabin and chassis. 2 weeks later, we rolled that out on its first deployment to be tested in the facility. You can see a bunch of figure 8s there. That's our team running and commissioning the vehicle to make sure that it's ready for installation of the final box. As you can see, it's the same box that they've cleaned up and painted. They loaded it up with water to start, but it's a beer delivery truck. They threatened to deliver, they threatened to pay us in beer. Maybe when we get bigger, I'll accept that deal, but we like dollars right now. Partnerships are important as well. But as you can see here, that's them loading a lot of their beer into the back, and then they sent that out on the Mexico streets. The Mexico streets are nothing to ignore. They are interesting streets. They're a great location to test and brutally test your technology. And this vehicle has been operating in Anheuser-Busch's Cognizance for the last 7 months, and they love it. So we're expecting a significant order of these vehicles in 2025 to continue to electrify their existing fleet. But that's just a snapshot of how it's worked. And then I'll go through to wrap some of these last slides before I open up for some questions. Okay, so it's very important for us to build through the value of creating communities, and workforce development is a huge important factor in how we do this. We cannot achieve our success alone. We can build these technologies, but they have to be accepted and developed and built by third-party partners in the ecosystem. So where are the careers? And this is a real quick scatter map of some of the technology sectors that we're seeing new careers really burgeon here in the Los Angeles area. Areas like vehicle design and production, infrastructure and support, hardware design and production, and policy and standards. There's a huge amount of work that has to be done to move the needle even faster on this space. So it's not just engineering. A lot of times if people have appetite for policy and regulation and looking at how programs are working, obviously, that's something that we need support on. And then sitting in the middle of it to align engineering organizations and suppliers with policy, creating workforce and a lot of programs and incentives to make that happen. So next slide, please. This is next slide's a quick snapshot of what we've been doing with my alma mater at Cal State Long Beach since we started in 2019. We started with a lot of educational material that you'll find on our website, white papers, consulting, things like that. And then we started really partnering within the LA and Long Beach region, and also had an economic partnership with the city of Bogota in Colombia to educate the greater Latam region from a more of a university public-private partnership approach, where we came in as private industry leads and really showcased the benefits of transitioning existing technologies to electric, including the repower approach, which is what you call our approach. Also at CSLB in 22 and 23, and this is highlighted because this is really when we started a hallmark program that I'll showcase in a second, the Zero Emission Vehicles Workforce Development Training Program. I'm chair of the advisory board for that group based out of Long Beach State, and we won a $500,000 grant from the California Energy Commission to develop a very grassroots educational approach on training workforce. Literally anybody can join the workforce development group. It's free right now because there's a stipend that still hasn't been exhausted. So anybody, literally anybody off the road that has a driver's license can sign up. They don't have to be a matriculated employee or a student of the university. They can have an experience that gets them a certificate at the end of the 6-month program. I can share some details about that. And beyond CSLB, obviously we want to use a lot of what we're doing with Cal State Long Beach to expand and partner with other ecosystem providers and partners as well. So a couple slides just to showcase in pictures a little bit of the work we're doing, and then I'm happy to open up for questions as well. So if you won't mind, next slide, please. So a little snapshot, we had LA Trade Tech come in, take a look at our operation, our facility. This is our building in Compton, Rancho Dominguez, perfectly set up for a training location. Next slide, please. A little bit about our technology in the flesh, if you will, knock on metal. The same organization came out to gather around our trucks, one of our trucks and build. As you can see, there are a lot of the components and technologies that we put into these chassis. There is no box on it. It gets installed at the end. Next slide. A little bit more with our educational partnership, again, with my alma mater. These are students, engineering students that are trying to advance their curriculum at Long Beach State from a bias of aerospace. You know, as somebody that was in aerospace, Long Beach State is very focused on aerospace, and we're trying to move them towards vehicle electrification. And this is some of the group and talent that's leading that path. Next slide. And then this slide and a few other slides that go behind this is actually an example of a certificate program that we've partnered with Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator to provide to some of their students. And we also work with Homeboy Industries, for example, to bring in all kinds of talent to be able to partner, you know, in providing these certificates. And then the last few slides are a couple of examples, as you see, of battery design, training, workforce development, showcasing how to use the tools, how to establish the processes, safe procedures, things like that. And last but not least, a snapshot of that exact same program I mentioned before, which is the CSULB Zero Emission Vehicles Program Certificate Program, I should say. So that is the majority of what I wanted to share. There's a couple of examples here on exactly what that CSULB zero emissions vehicles training program is. I can go through those pretty rapidly, but field those potentially through some questions as well. So I think I'll pause here, open it for questions, and maybe use some of this material to really answer some of that come. So thank you. I'd love to open it up right now.
Wow, Bill, that was an amazing presentation. And again, just thank you for being here and really just sharing the wealth of knowledge and information that you have, but also just creating a phenomenal company. So as we dive right into the first question, in your presentation, you talked about technician training for introduction to battery electric, among other trainings. Are these training only available to Evo Electric employees, or is there potential to open training to the larger industry?
Yeah, great question. So first and foremost, this is a great slide to land on because this program was our collaboration to come in from the private sector with ASEV Electric and to be able to showcase our own processes, procedures, and internal trainings and be able to offer them through a program that has the funding to make them agnostic. So these are available, like I said, through CSULB's Zero Emission Vehicles Training Program. Any individual that has the appetite to get involved and try to earn a certificate, as it says here, is able to join this training and earn a certificate after the program. And this is sort of our contribution that we can provide from an internal perspective. The program is very similar internally as well. So for new employees, technicians, workforce that we bring in, it's a very similar approach, but it's obviously a little bit more hands-on with our own product. So great question. I can't say enough about this program. And what we want to use is this program is just an example of what we can continue to create and foster in the industry and start partnering with other groups like United Technicians Institute, Society of Automotive Engineers, and provide curriculum-based training as well.
Wow, that's amazing. So this just kind of goes into our second question. As you think about workforce development challenges and gaps in the transition, when you think about what are some workforce development challenges and gaps in the transition to electric trucks, what are some of those challenges that you would say?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So I would say that the biggest challenge, and this is a question that was sort of asked of me last week as well at a panel that I was at, but I think the biggest challenge right now is distraction. And let me dig into that a little bit. So there's two methods of distraction. One, there's a lot of focus being pushed on organizations that talk a big game. You know, we're going to change the world, and and that's not bad. You have to push a vision, you have to push a mission, but this is a very difficult thing to do. To move the world from a dependence on combustion to electric, it takes a lot of focus. It takes nonpartisanship. It takes everybody coming together and saying, how do we make sense of this? We owe it to our families and to our quality of life, right? So that distraction leads to another distraction, which is often this technology gets politicized, unfortunately, and it's not meant to be politicized, right? We do it in such a way where we're saying, let's not alienate the workforce, let's not alienate the customer. Let's make this transition as simple as possible so we can get back to work and get back to generating revenues and income. So because of that, a lot of people, back to the workforce question, a lot of people come through our doors, so to speak, whether it's through this program or through interviews or partnerships, with a bias on understanding what the electric future means, right? It's an unfortunate bias that maybe they didn't come up themselves, but they're just privy to a lot of the conversations and a lot of the sensational news that's going on. So we first have to start with a basic education. Let's go all the way back and let's talk about what it is we're doing, right? Let's ignore all the stuff on top. Let's look at the science. Let's talk about basic tools that are required to do the work. And then what we end up finding as a success point on highlighting some of these gaps is there's an artificial gap in understanding, meaning people will come in and think, oh, I don't think I can do this. It seems too complicated. And that's that bias that's working hard on them, right? Mm-hmm. We go back to the basics and we say, actually, 90% of what you've done at Penske or what you've done at Napa as a technician, for example, is still extremely valuable and viable on this work we're doing. The 10% that we're going to teach you, you can get in a matter of a couple of weeks, because we make sure that you understand what this function is of this product, what to touch here, what requires safety, things like that. So the turnaround is very quick, where suddenly, workforce is able to look at this value proposition and say, okay, I get it. This all makes sense. Somebody finally took the time to break it down for me in a way that makes a lot of tangible sense. And so we're happy to address that gap by actually providing very basic, very pointed education and showcasing the value of changing the world in this approach, right?
Yeah, I definitely love the way you described that. I feel like that is the basic concept of what workforce development is and what we're gathered here to do. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to open up questions for the audience. Giovanni, is there anyone in the audience that may have questions?
I currently don't see none, but we do want to encourage anyone at this moment, feel free to raise hand, come off mute, put your question in the chat. We'd love to, get to any questions that any of our audience members has at this moment. I see a hand up. Linda Cleveland, go ahead. Go for it.
Hello, everyone. I really enjoyed this presentation, and in my mind, I'm thinking, how can we relate this transition or this conversion for my neighborhood? So I'm in, South LA, but I do my advocacy work for environmental issues in Watts. And what we see now is that we have a lot of food trucks, ice cream trucks going through the neighborhood. And based on what you're saying, the cost of conversion are there funds readily available to really assist these small business owners with the transition over to electric vehicles? You have the conversion unit that you're using, but does that apply to businesses like that? Thank you.
This is an amazing question. I really appreciate it. So short answer is yes. And the longer short answer is yes, with a specific angle of really supporting small business first. And this is something that our friends at CalSTART can expand on. It's a rule that CARB made that enables incentives towards new trucks in the medium and heavy duty sector. It's a program called HVIP, which is a voucher-based program. HVIP has a provision specifically for small businesses called ISEF, Integrated Small Electric Fleets. That ISEF program takes the voucher amounts for HVIP and doubles them. So when you're looking at small community operations, let's say it's an ice cream truck company that happens to have 2 trucks, for example, and ISEF will come in and say, well, we'll offer you potentially up to $120,000 per truck, because like I mentioned, those trucks are expensive. $180,000 is the average price for a brand new one. Now, one of the issues that we have, with our repower approach is there's an artificial stigma provision by CARB that repower should not, conversion, essentially the other way to say it, should not receive the same amount of incentives. We don't understand where that came from. We actually need probably everybody's support on this call to get that CARB rule overturned. And if it's not overturned, we're going to commission the assembly, our local assembly members, to make it a law, right? So there's nothing in the process that shows that a repowered vehicle isn't as good or even better than a brand new one. Plus, we're delivering. The brand new vehicles aren't being delivered. So to get back to the question, yes, there's incentives available, but really a lot of that incentive money is kind of left on the table because people are still waiting for these trucks to be provided, these opportunities to be provided. And so repowering makes a lot of sense to get there. And yeah, I'd love to, if there's any more questions on that, I'd love to offer my email at the end. You can send me a chat or whatnot, and I'm happy to answer more details, provide more details.
Thank you.
I see another question here. Jackie, do you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to commend you on your excellent presentation. Conversions were definitely something our Watts Clean Air and Energy Committee in Wakanda saw as being the future, and it was pretty much the most comprehensive presentation that I've seen directly tied into the most effective cost benefit and benefit for the workforce development that we are all striving for. So I'll just commend you on the great work that's being done. I had questions earlier, but your presentation pretty much answered them. And so I'll just say that we're here for support, and we'll be happy to help in any way to get that CARB rule overturned, because we know the benefit, and we also do not want to see any more money left on the table that could have been implemented in the community. Thank you all.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. We need your help. So it's great if we can do this work and everybody can rally together to make this happen. I mean, like I said, our success doesn't exist in a bubble. It is our mutual success for our children and our future generations. Thank you for that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Jackie. I do have, would love to ask a question from one of the prepared questions we had for you, Bill. I can pose this question while anything else comes from the audience. So again, feel free to raise hand, put it in the chat. In the meantime, you know, Bill, you mentioned upskilling that happened with the work that you all did in Mexico with the Modelo trucks, right? And we had a prepared question about what does upskilling look like to retrain technicians to work on medium duty, heavy duty battery electric trucks, right? So I'm assuming that's exactly essentially what you described you did in Mexico. Perhaps these were, you know, technicians that had years of experience on diesel trucks and you know, were upskilled to do the conversion, the repowering that you just talked about. Can you walk us through what that looks like? Would love to learn a little bit more about that, as that is very relevant to the objectives of this advisory committee.
Yeah, great question. When we look at the first level of partnership that we look at when we partner with groups that help us convert these trucks is obviously the easier approach, which is groups and service centers that already have the history of servicing diesel trucks, you know, for most of their existence, right? And so when it comes to upskilling between that type of agency, and let's just throw it out there, like a Napa Truck Center, they've been doing this for many decades. We look at their technician, their order of approach, their methodologies, and we borrow them because it's the same type of approach and thought process that we utilize on electric vehicles, but there may be just less touch time, meaning specifically, you don't do oil changes on an electric vehicle. You do brake changes the same way, but you know, one of the benefits you get from a battery electric truck is we get what's called regenerative braking. So when you let your foot off that throttle, the electric motor, instead of providing output power, spins the opposite way and turns into a generator. And you get, like, if you visualize, you know, my Yeti mug here, you get like little trickles of energy put back into your battery, right? A little bit at a time. And that adds up over time. There's a benefit. But what that really benefits is you're not doing the friction brakes. You're not using the friction brakes for a lot of those basic brakes. You do use them for safety brakes, just to know, so there's no safety issue there. But you get that benefit. That's my point. So because of that, you know, we still look for technicians and workforce that knows how to approach these vehicles from a classical perspective, because then we can bridge that gap by saying, all right, the first point is, let's take a look at all the systems in this structure and let's break them down. What is the battery's role? What was that like before in a diesel truck? What's the motor's role? What was that like before in a diesel truck? Is there a transmission? No, one less thing to touch, one less thing to fail, right? And then the same thing occurs on power electronics, where you're like, well, you used to have a belt system on your engine that were driving, you know, a lot of the components like alternators and all that stuff. Where do you get that stuff from? Well, now you've got power converters. Now you've got pumps that come directly off a high voltage system. So the short answer there is we set up a comprehensive plan of, this is what you're used to, this is what the new things are. And then between those things, we draw the lines in training and upskilling the technicians to say, like, look, for example, a battery represents your fuel tank. The amount of service that you have to a battery versus a fuel tank is much less. So we put together that service list, we put together that touch time. We basically say, don't open up a battery. You don't need to. It's basically a commodity. So that approach where we, during the actual upskilling, we actually kind of do an is-was type approach. Like I said, what is the state of the art, and then what was it? And we draw that comparison first and foremost. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the technicians and workforce can pick that up very quick because it's functionally the same thing, right? When we go a little bit further and we say, if we have a brand new workforce, like what we have in the Cal State Long Beach program, zero emissions vehicles, we have to go even more elementary, right? We even look at even basic physics. One of those approaches might be doing, for example, a small car project where we build a car. We show, like, well, this is how a car moves, right? And what usually powers the car is an engine, or it's a motor, things like that. So we break it down into basic semantics, and then we start introducing the idea of maintenance and training and touch time for that workforce on the vehicles. We educate them all the way back on understanding why are vehicles serviced and where are they serviced. And then we set them on that branch to be like, it's interesting because when we start from scratch, a lot of people that don't have a technician background, they're like, why do I have to get my hands so dirty on a diesel, right? And we're like, well, here's where we can branch and be like, now it's electric, you don't, right? These things are much easier, it's much less touch time, it's a longer process, a lot more valuable. So that's where we go even further back and have more global examples of what vehicles need in terms of components and what the options are with zero emissions versus diesel. So that's essentially how we're, when we're looking at upskilling workforce, we do a lot of comparison, a lot of matchmaking from a function perspective. And like I said, recognize that a lot of people pick it up pretty quickly because we can use some very tangible examples that are right there in their face, right?
Thank you so much for walking us through that and the juxtaposing from someone that is years in the field as a technician versus someone that is new, like the CSULB program that you talked about, and how that approach may differ, right? So thank you for explaining that to us. One last quick question here before I just wrap us up. Being mindful of time, Linda did ask, going back to the HVIP funding you mentioned, Bill, are there other financing sources to assist in the conversion? Just because, small businesses may not be able to personally finance, right? The conversion process. Are there other ones other financing sources that you may be aware of?
Yes. So the nice thing about HVIP is because of HVIP, it helps to bookend or underwrite a lot of the other financing approaches that are available through our partners. So what I mean there is we can do traditional vehicle financing on a vehicle purchase through our partners at TCI. TCI is a group based out of Boyle Heights that is basically a small Ryder Penske enterprise for trucks like the one behind me. We can also do vehicle leasing. Most of the market, when they're moving from trucks, diesel trucks and gas trucks to electric, recognize because of this OpEx benefit, this monthly savings, it doesn't really make sense to own a truck forever, right? You can actually use that truck for 10 to 15 years and just pay for its use. Somebody else can handle the residual value, and that's where we come in. The third aspect that's unique to EV Electric and what makes us incredibly valuable in this space is something that hasn't been introduced in the history of battery electric vehicles in this space, which is battery leasing, right? So what we recognize is a lot of our customers, when they purchase a truck, it's nice to, or any vehicle, it's nice to know that you've got 6, 8, 10 years warranty, 200,000 miles, whatever it ends up being. But once that warranty is done, what happens with all the components that you have? Where do you get the replacement parts? And for example, what happens with a battery? And if that battery fails after that warranty, nobody knows or wants to know what to do with the battery. They just want it fixed. They want their vehicle back on the road, right? So because of that, we've aligned with our customers, especially small business owners, and we're offering an innovative battery leasing program, which means there should be no reason for you to ever have to worry about the battery. If you're going to lease this truck for 7 to 10 years, we will lease you the battery as a sub item. We'll take responsibility of it as EV Electric, and we'll make sure that you have the best uptime of your vehicle. So at the end of the day, after 7 to 10 years, we will be able to take ownership of that battery and potentially put it into a second life, or replace your battery with a new battery, for example. Anything's possible when the battery becomes more of an asset in that relationship. What that translates back to the question was, what does that translate to upfront cost reduction? Well, we basically zero out the upfront cost of the battery because we've made it a monthly cost. It's an operational cost. So that's a discount of anywhere between $20,000 to $30,000 off of about $100,000 truck. So I didn't mention the pricing, but our pricing all in is about $100,000. Again, it's $80,000 cheaper than a brand new battery electric, and only about 10 to 15,000 more than a brand new diesel. So, but we can continue to remove those upfront cost barriers with these innovative programs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Bill. And Bill, once again, thank you so much for your time, for being here, for sharing all the wonderful work that is happening at EV Electric. And we appreciate you sharing your expertise here with all of us today. Gia,
thank you very
next
much.
slide, please. just to close us off, I know we're 2 minutes over. Our next WDAC quarterly meeting will take place on October 8th. That'll be the last one for the year. Same time, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Calendar invites have been sent to everyone. If you're new to this space or you want to invite other folks that you think should be at this at the table, please email me directly and I can send out those calendar invites to additional new folks that would like to join this group moving forward. And then also our next industry partner webinar series. Topic, it's going to be EV Site Planning 101, and that'll take place on November 6th, also from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And as always, we'll follow up with a we'll follow up with an email with links to the recording of this meeting, a copy of the PowerPoint deck for everyone, and the meeting summary. So that everyone can have that for their records and also rewatch this at their leisure, or if you were unable to join to watch it as well. So again, thank you all so much. I want to thank the team for putting up a wonderful program for today, and again, our wonderful guest speaker, Bill Beverly, for joining us. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.